So if we take our sequence G, C, G, D, what we need to learn now is how to move our triad shape around. So the very first one that we looked at, the very first shape, one down at the 3rd fret, we already talked about that the root note was the note on the thinnest string at the 3rd fret. So that chord becomes G because the note at the 3rd fret on the thinnest string is the note G. So that becomes G chord, or G major, or G major triad, you can call it whatever you like, or just G is okay as well. So that's G. Now let's say we wanted to use that same shape and make it a C chord. Now the thing that the importance of knowing where your root note is, that all you have to do is move that root note to the note C and you've got yourself a C chord. So the root note was on the thinnest string at the 3rd fret, that was the note G. Now hopefully most of you are starting to get to know the names of the notes on the guitar. It's really, really important. If you're not, you definitely want to go to check out the website and suss out some ways to do that. The note C is found at the 8th fret on the thinnest string. So now we're just going to use that same, I'm going to call it shape 1, the same shape that we started off with in G down at the 3rd fret. We now move it up to the 8th fret and we've got our C chord. So G down at the 3rd fret, 8th fret, C chord. Now we said our progression was going to go back to G, so back all the way to the 3rd fret. And now we want a D chord. Now hopefully most of you know that D is 1 tone higher than C, so if C was at the 8th fret, D must be at the 10th fret. We're just going to strum the chord each once just so you can hear what's going on. So we'll be going G, 2, 3, up to C, C, 2, 3, 4, back to G, 2, 3, and up to D, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, up to C, 2, 3, 4, back to G, 2, 3, 4, and up to D, 2, 3, 4. Now what you want to try having a go at now is getting your mate to, your buddy, or if you've got a recording device, record yourself just playing G. In fact, I'll play rhythm guitar now. I'm changing the lesson all the way through this time. This is quite funny. So I'm going to play now the sequence G, C, G, and D. And what I want you to try and do is move your chord and go G from there up to the C, back to the G, and up to the D. So here we go. 3, 4. G to C, back to G, and up to D. And I'll do it again, so you should be in the 3rd fret now. And then you're going to move up to the 8th fret, back to the 3rd fret, and then up to the 10th fret. And you finish on the G. Now, you can either just strum this chord, just like 2, 3, 4, and then up to C, or you could make up a pattern. You could go, and then to C. 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. You can do it any way you want. You could go. Doesn't really matter. You can kind of play about with the rhythm a little bit yourself. In fact, that's one of the things that'll keep it interesting if you're jamming with your buddy and he's playing the chords and you get to play about with the triads. It kind of makes it fun. And you'll find the sound that I've got's got a little bit of delay on it, and I think a little bit of chorus as well, and that kind of sound is a really nice one. Clean guitar sound, playing triads, while an acoustic guitar plays the chords. Mwah, bellissimo, beautiful, beautiful sound. So that's something that you want to have a little bit of play about with, just experiment with the rhythm that you'd use. Now that's just using shape 1, but we got 3 shapes that we can deal with. So the second shape that we looked at was the G chord based around the 7th fret. Now that shape, the root note was on the 2nd string. That's the note G, and the reason that this is a G chord or a G triad is because our 3rd finger in this case is on the root note, which is the note G at the 8th fret of the 2nd string. Now we're going to stick with our same little chord sequence, G, C, G, D. So if we want to move this one to a C chord, we have to put the note on the 2nd string onto the note C. So those of you who know, get to it now. Those of you who don't, we're going to now move that 3rd finger up to the 13th fret of the 2nd string. That would now be a C chord. So your hand is now up at the 12th fret. Now we go back to G, which was based around the 7th fret. note on the 8th fret, of course, not forgetting where the root note is. Knowing the root note is the most important thing about this exercise. And then if we want to go to a D chord, well, we've got a little D chord. Hey, we already know, you're probably already familiar with D chord, at least you should be if you're doing this lesson on triads. So, and that one would be, of course, the root note on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And I mean, it wouldn't hurt if you played the open D string as well, like a regular D chord, but for this exercise I'd recommend that you don't. Just play the 3 strings that your fingers are on. So, in this one, now if we use this, the same sequence as before, we're going to have G, 2, 3, up to C, 1, 2, 3, back to G, 2, 3, and then all the way down to D, 2, 3, and through that again, G, 2, 3, all the way up to C, 12th fret, 2, 3, and then back to the 7th fret for the G chord, and then down to the 2nd fret for D. And then through, and so on. And again, you could change the rhythm of it. You don't have to just do this one strum. If you want to change the rhythm or pick out the notes individually, that will sound cool. Now, I'm going to play the chords again for you, just so you can practice moving that little triad shape from one part of the neck to the other. So we're using the one that looks like a D chord. We're going to be moving it. I'm going to talk about the root notes now. The root note is at the 8th fret for the first shape, for the G chord. The root note is at the 13th fret for the C chord. Back to the 8th fret. And down to the 3rd fret. So last time through I was describing kind of where the first finger sat. That time I'm talking about where the root note is, what fret the root note was on, because that's the bit that I really want you to remember. So here we go, I'm going to play the chords now, and I'm going to be calling the fret that the root note is in, which is the note that you'll be playing in this case with your 3rd finger. So pause, check out the shapes, make sure you know where they are, and then have a go at playing along. Here we go. So 3, 4, G chord. That was at the 8th fret to C. Right up at the 13th fret you should be now. Back to G, which had the root note at the 8th, to D. And again. Should be at the 8th fret now, to going to C. Right up at the 13th, back to G, which had the root note in the 8th, and then to D. The 3rd shape that we talked about, I'm calling it shape 3, is the one that's kind of based around the 10th to 12th fret, and the root note is on the 3rd string. So we've got our 3rd finger on the root note, little finger underneath, and 1st finger back in the 10th fret. So it's going 12, 12, 10, and that is the G chord. Now, if we want to change that one to a C chord, we need to find the note C on the 3rd string. So again, those of you who know where that is, get to it now, and for those of you who don't, we're going to slide our shape right down here, because the note C is the 5th fret of the 3rd string. So we're using that same shape again, and we've got our little C chord. And then we go back to G with the root note on the 12th fret, and then we've got to get to D. Hopefully you remember, D is just one tone or 2 semitones, 2 frets higher than the C. So that will put the root note at the 7th fret. First finger is obviously going to be in the 5th fret for that one. So it's just going 7, 7, 5. And again, we'd take it through that same sequence again. So this time we'd have G, down to C, back to G, and then down to D. Here we go again. G, down to C, back up to G, and then to D. Okay, here we go. I'm going to play some chords for you now to have a go at moving that around. Here we go. So 2, 3, 4, G, sliding it down to C, back to G, and then up to the D chord, or rather down to the D chord. G, over to C, down to the root note of the 5th string, 5th fret, back up to G,